Did you know that artists have been making color charts in some form since at least the 15th century? But it was during the Renaissance that artists started to make charts to communicate and categorize pigments and paint mixing techniques. There is literally an infinite number of charts we can make, since the color combinations we can make by mixing different pigments is vast, even with a very limited palette. I myself have done many through the years. So, which color charts will be the most useful to make? The best answer will be to limit the color combinations to the colors we like to use most often. But since I am not the kind of person who is comfortable with limitations, I am here to show you the palette that I consider the most comprehensive and at the same time helpful and very easy to make. So gather your materials and let's make it together. The supplies we are going to use are the following: a long ruler, the quiller wheel, cold pressed linseed oil, but you can use also mineral spirits if you want, or a different kind of medium. Basically this is used to make the paint a little bit more manageable. Mixing palette, a well sharpened pencil. This is a red filter to check for values, and the paints we're going to be using are going to be titanium white, Windsor yellow, and you could be using also Windsor lemon. The most important thing is that it is transparent. We need to use the three primary colors in a transparent version for this. So Windsor yellow, permanent rose by Winsor & Newton, and Windsor blue green shade by Winsor & Newton. It can also be phthalo blue. Phthalo blue is basically the same color, and ivory black. Mixing palette of some sort to mix your paints. And lastly, and of course the most important here, is going to be a board to make all your pigments. This one is a board that I created myself with a piece of wood that I had laying around, and then I glued a linen canvas on it because I had it, and it has some nasty wrinkles around that I didn't like, so I didn't want to use this for a finished painting, but I thought it would be perfect for a palette. And you know that I don't like to waste things, so the panoramic shape will be perfect for this. But you can certainly use any other board that you have laying around that is big enough. Make sure to write on the back of the board what it is about. Alright, so at the top right here we have our primary yellow, which will be Windsor yellow. Then we have our primary red, which will be permanent rose. And right here we'll have our primary blue, which will be Windsor blue. The three primary colors, alright? Yellow, red, and blue. And all of the other colors that you see right here, the rest of the hues, will be made with these three primary colors and will be placed on the first row under hues, right here in these 12 squares, which are these 12 colors right here. We begin with the yellow and we place it right here. We add a little bit of permanent rose and we place it right here to create this color. A little bit more of permanent rose to make this color, a little more permanent rose to make this color, until you get to the permanent rose, which will be right here, and we'll be putting it right here. All right, a little bit of blue to make this color will give us magenta, more blue will give it this one, and so forth until we get to the primary blue, which will be placed right here, and then blue green, and then green, and the lighter green right here by adding a little bit more yellow. You'll see me doing it, all right, later on. So we have to make enough of these colors right here to make sure we have plenty to do all of our tints, our tones, and our shades right here, all right? The tints will be made by adding white to all of the hues that we have in the first row, and then we'll be placing them right here. So to our yellow, we'll be adding white and we place it right here. To our darker yellow, we'll add white and we place it right here, and so forth. The tones will be made by adding black and white or gray to all of the hues that we have in the first row, and will be placed right here. And the shades at the bottom will be made by adding ivory black to all of the hues that we have in the first row, and they will be all right here. Okay, I began by laying down the three primary colors, and I'm counting the squares in between to make sure that I place in the palette the color exactly where it belongs, because otherwise I can get really confused. I dip my brush in the medium, in this case linseed oil, so the color will flow smoothly, and I began by painting the first square, which is my Windsor yellow. I continue with the permanent rose, which it will be our primary red. With a different flat brush, I paint the square, and I use a little bit of medium to make sure that the color is transparent so I can really see what I have. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you have 3 clean crisp flat brushes for each of the colors. One for the yellows, another for the reds, and another for the blues. And this way you won't have to clean the brushes that thoroughly. Only wipe them gently will suffice, and you don't get the colors contaminated. I paint the blue square with my Windsor blue, and now I'm getting ready to paint the secondary colors. So I'm grabbing some Windsor yellow and a speck, not a lot, only a little bit of the permanent rose to create my orange yellow, and I will be placing this on the second square that I have. Now I am getting ready to paint the third square, so I proceed the same way. I start grabbing my Windsor yellow, and I grab quite a bit because I need to make enough of the hues. Now I'm grabbing just a little bit more permanent rose that I did for my second square, just to make sure that I have a pretty good orange here. Right, so the fourth color I'm going to be making is going to be what it will be considered a pure red, because the permanent rose, even though it's considered a primary here, it leans a little bit towards the pink, but we need to use permanent rose because it is a transparent red, and it will be the one that will allow us to mix all the other colors. So basically, when you think about red, this is the color that we're making right now, and that's the one that we're going to put it in our fourth square. Okay, it appears that it has gotten a little bit too pink. It needs to be a little bit more orange, so all I have to do is grab a little bit of the orange, or the third square actually, just a little bit, just to make it lean a bit more orange, so it will have a little bit more difference. Now it's not easy to see it with the light. I use natural light in here because natural light allows you to see colors a little bit better. Right, so now I'm going to be making the sixth square, which is a little bit purple or permanent rose with a teeny bit of blue. Make sure there is only a teeny bit because phthalo blue has a lot of tinting strength. So if you use too much, it will completely obliterate the mixture. And the reason why we're using phthalo blue and not ultramarine blue is because phthalo blue is the purest form of blue that we have, and it is transparent. And remember, we need a transparent version of each color. So that's why we're using phthalo blue, but it has a lot of tinting strength, so be very careful. And now we'll make a really beautiful magenta. It's just beautiful, and you can see that we're making it with permanent rose and a dot of blue, and it rivals a lot of the beautiful magentas that you can find in the store already on their own. All right, so I'm making the 7th square now, and all I'm doing is adding just a little bit more blue to the permanent rose. So each time a tiny bit more blue until I get to the pure blue. And as you can see, it's getting very, very dark in a hurry. So what I'm doing is I'm adding more medium to my brush to lift some of the paint. And you can see as I'm doing that, then you get a gorgeous dioxin purple, which is exactly the color that we have. Look how incredibly pure and clean this purple is. And we're making it with our permanent rose and that of that blue. I'm making the 8th square now, and I'm adding even more blue. And this is a tricky one, but when we're done, what we need to come up with is basically a version of ultramarine blue. It should really look like ultramarine blue. If we make it look like ultramarine blue, then we have succeeded. And voila, there you have it, ultramarine blue. Amazing, isn't it? So if you don't have ultramarine blue, but you need it, but you have phthalo blue and you have permanent rose, then you have ultramarine blue. Now I'm adding a dot of the ultramarine blue to my magenta version because it looked like it was a little bit too red and there wasn't enough difference in here. So see how easy it is? You gently cover with the blue and then you fix it. Making now the 10 square, and these 3 remaining squares will be leaning towards green now. So to the blue I'm adding a little bit of yellow, not a lot because I don't want the blue to turn to green too fast. I want to make a blue green, and it has a lot of tinting strength, so I need to add a little bit of medium to it to make sure that I can really see what I have. So this is sort of like emerald green, turquoise blue, Caribbean blue. Now I'm adding the 11th square, making the 11th square, which has blue and more yellow, because what I'm making right now is what you will call viridian. So when you think of the color viridian or a really true green, that's what I'm making right now. So I have to add quite a bit of yellow since the yellow is also transparent. And I add medium to the mixture a little bit just to make sure that I can see the transparency underneath, and you can see that looks really entirely like the color viridian. Alright, so lastly we are going to do the 12th square, and this one will definitely have a lot more yellow because we are going to make the green that is right next to the primary yellow. So it will be a very, very yellow green. If you buy it straight from the tube, it will be the equivalent of cadmium green light. I am getting ready to do the tints. So from the very first color or square that I have that is yellow, I'm going to add white, and it's going to be a fairly amount of white because I really want this to be a very light toned to see good difference. See, I've done this chart many times, and in the first chart that I did, I remember I didn't add enough white and it was very little difference. So I want to make sure that I can really see the difference because we only have 48 squares here and we want to make them count. Okay, so I'm starting the 2nd square now, and what I'm doing is I'm adding a substantial amount of white, basically the same amount that I added to my yellow. I'm adding the white to the 2nd square now, which is the yellow orange, and there is a very little difference as you can see when I add the white, but it's definitely a much warmer tint. I started with the 3rd square now, which will be the tint of my true orange. So when you think of a true orange, then I'm adding pretty much the same amount of white that I added to the previous 2 squares, and I'm getting a very pastelish orange, really soft, actually quite beautiful orange. Right, I'm starting with the fourth now, which it will be the tint of what you will consider the true red. And this is actually my favorite of all of the red tints or the warm tints, because you can make a really beautiful, delicious pink. It looks like a warm, soft pink. It's just delightful. I really love this one. All right, and now we're making our fifth tint, and this one will be of the permanent rose, or what we consider our primary red in this chart. And you can see how bright and beautiful this tint is. But unlike the previous tint, this one is not very believable. This is really, it is too fluorescent or too neon. We're making our sixth square now, and this will be more purplish, and doing the same thing as I previously did. I'm just adding a substantial amount of white to the hue that I had above, or our equivalent of this magenta color, and it's a very beautiful red purple. We are making our seventh tint now, and we're doing the same thing as before. We're just adding white to it, and as you can see, this is substantially more blue. This is what you will consider a true mauve or a blue purple. We are making our eighth tint, the one that looks like ultramarine blue. So this is blue with some purple undertones, right before our true blue, which is the Windsor blue. Now I'm making my favorite tint, the one of the Phthalo or the Windsor blue, because it's really bright and powerful. It is not believable, though it's too neon, but it is quite beautiful. We are making our 10th tint right now, and this is from the turquoise or Caribbean blue hue that we made at the top. And this is very beautiful. When you think of a blue-green, this is really the color that will come to mind. We're making now our 11th tint, and this one is of a really true green. When you think of Viridian or the real green, this is the tint that we get. Lastly, we are making our 12th tint, which is the lightest or warmest green that we have here. All right, so now I start with the tones, and what I do is I mix a fairly good amount of black and white, basically 50% black and 50% white, and I start with the first oh wow, I just realized when I'm doing this that I made a major mistake, because I'm supposed to mix the black and white into the hues of the first row, and instead I'm just mixing it into the tint that I made. So these tones are gonna be really grayed down. So basically I made tones from the tints, or tint tones. Look at me, I invented a new terminology. See, what happened is I've been really sick for the last few days, and I wanted to use the light this time, natural light, to do this chart, because with natural light you really see the colors right. But I was running against time, because time was changing rapidly, and you can see in some of the passages some of the sun peeking in the board, so I kept moving the board. And normally what you obviously should do is take frequent breaks to clear your mind, and I didn't do that. I did the whole chart without taking a break, and you can see the results that I got myself mixed up and I didn't do what I was supposed to do, and I'm already, because of this cold that lingered, working at 50% capacity of mental capacity. So this is definitely a lesson to be learned. I actually have made this chart 4 times before, so this is my 5th, and it's gonna be interesting because since I'm making tones out of tints instead of tones out of the hues, I'm going to end up with different swatches, a lot more subdued and delicate, and it's going to be interesting to compare this chart with the previous chart that I've made that was supposed to be correct. So I've always said that there's no such a thing as a mistake, because sometimes when you think you're making a mistake, you find something out that you didn't know before. And these gray down tones that I'm getting, they're quite lovely actually. All right, so I'm going to continue making these tones, or tint tones like we said previously, and see what this road takes us. So far I'm really liking these grays, and I'm thinking house walls colors. I mean, especially the 3 first greens, those are really beautiful. Make sure when you work with this that the brushes are flat and in pretty good shape. So use the newest brushes that you have, because if the hair is frayed, then it's gonna get really messy. Now, if you're really anal, you can actually order these boards and you can apply some plastic covers with the squares. So if you take the plastic cover, actually the paint and the squares will be very neat. But like I said before, I wanted to use what I had, and I obviously don't have those plasticky things, and I didn't want to order any more boards. I wanted to use this one, and I'm not an anal person, even though I like things neat and tidy. I'm aware that the purpose of this exercise is to learn about colors, and it doesn't really matter if the squares are not absolutely perfect and the white spaces are actually neat and tidy. I like to leave a little bit of white in between them to see the separation of the colors, but you can see clearly that they're not perfect. And I didn't put any labels in the board or anything for that matter, for the same reason, because it really defeats the purpose. If you spend way too long and too much time in making sure that everything is neat and tidy and using the ruler and the perfect squares and the perfect paint and the stickers and everything, then you're really not spending the time where you should in making the chart, making the colors as accurate as possible, or spending the time doing something more productive, like painting a painting. Don't get caught up in technical details too much, because that can be paralyzing and too time consuming, and your time is better served in other things. So here it is, our last tone, and we have completed the 3rd row. We are getting ready to do the last row, and those are shades. So to the shades we'll only be mixing black. So we started from the 1st row of our hues, the pure yellow, and then I'm adding black, and I'm making the 1st square or the 1st shade. Now notice something very interesting, which is when you apply black to yellow, you don't make a darker version of yellow or a shadow. You're really making green. So this is something that you learn a lot when you're making charts. You find things like that yellow on black does not give you a darker yellow. It really transforms itself into a completely different hue, which is green. Now I'm adding a little bit of green, a little bit of black to all of the row in there to know that I am mixing black into every hue and see what colors we can come out with. Continue making the shades of the second and the third square. Now, since these are mainly mixtures with yellow and a little bit of red, I'm just getting green, but I'm getting 3 different versions of green, and those 3 greens are extremely believable and beautiful and far more interesting than any green that you can find from the tube if you buy it in the store. Now, once I start really adding the black to the red, that's what I entered my favorite shades, because these look like burnt sienna and definitely alizarin crimson, as you can see it. If you just add black to the red, you really come up with a burnt sienna, beautiful version of burnt sienna. And if you add the black to the permanent rose, you're really getting alizarin crimson. It really looks exactly like that. So if you don't have alizarin crimson and if you don't have burnt sienna, you know, because you made this chart, that you can make it yourself. And by altering how much black and how much pigment do you use, you can make infinite versions of burnt sienna and alizarin crimson, and all of them will be quite lovely. All right, I think I'm getting confused here. I probably grabbed the wrong mixture because I'm counting the squares and I'm not getting the same amount. So like I was saying previously, this is what happens when you don't take enough breaks. And in this case, I actually took none. I didn't take any breaks whatsoever. So one of these squares is not going to be correct. I am cleaning the edges a little bit with a Q-tip, so you can see how easy it is. If you get it messed up, you can add a little bit of medium to the Q-tip and just apply to the board and clean the areas that got a little bit too messy. All right, so these shades now, they are true shades and they're the darker versions of blue. So colors and purple. Colors have not been, or chroma has not been changed that much. The hue, what we're getting is a darker version of the hues that we have in the first row. So black really helps with the blues, not so much with the yellows and the oranges. Some of you requested in your comments that I made charts. So this is the reason why I decided to do it, because I want you to know that I listen to you, and your opinion and your feedback and ideas are very important to me, because this is what I do this. I do it for you and to help you. So if you enjoy this video and you found it useful, even with the mistakes that I made, please subscribe if you haven't already and give it a like, because that will help me a great deal. And here you have it. This is the board completed.